Welcome aboard, everybody. I'm here with my lovely friend Brie. Brie and I used to work together a few years ago for Nissan North America. It was a corporate flight department in America, and Brie is over from Spain, from America, from around the world. We've had lunch together, and we're going to have a lovely chat about mindset, confidence, tell some stories, chew the fat, work out what makes us successful in life, what makes us healthy. You've probably noticed I haven't got any teeth. It's a long story. If you want to find out more, there are some stuff on my YouTube channel about it. But my little false teeth fell out in the middle of the night. I can't find them. I might have swallowed them. I didn't want to go through the loo this morning to find them, so I'm having to do this without. But anyway, it's quite a good one about resilience, isn't it, really, and having to adapt to circumstances. So anyway, enough about me.
I don't know whether it's you having to, you having to adapt to circumstances or me having to adapt to the fact that I've got to go out with a toothless hobo for lunch. Bit of both, I suppose.
It was.
Works for both of us.
It was a new situation for both of us, isn't it? So anyway, hopefully you guys can understand what I'm saying here. Of course, we work in a very traditionally male-dominated, 95% are still men in the cockpit, but very much the sort of, the alpha male types, although there are very different types of personalities, but like cars, they like aeroplanes, and I sometimes wear thin of that a little bit sometimes. And you're on a flight deck for 12 or 15 hours, you've been up for much longer than that either side of it, and then you're going back to the hotel and in the bar afterwards, and I want to develop a relationship beyond that, and I find that quite hard sometimes. And I do find sometimes, again, go back to that isolation thing. I mean, how do you, when you're trying to deal with the likes of us in the cockpit, this is about conflict resolution generally, isn't it? And creating better relationships, which of course is always a major part of emotional intelligence. I mean, how do you deal with that? Tired, exhausted, you're trying to deal with the private, with the rich people's requests and about you running around in taxis, trying to pick up loads of food. You're trying to deal with the dynamic with looking after us in the front. You know that safety's involved. I mean, how do you help us to get on better? I suppose is a good question.
We all know that the pilots are worse than our fussiest clients.
Very true. What, me included? You don't have to answer that. You don't have to answer that.
There was plenty of night. Well, it's the only thing that's missing in the flight deck is a call bell, I suppose. But we're generally in close enough proximity that can be difficult too. There was plenty of. No, you weren't really that difficult. Just there was plenty of nights where, quite like you just made me a cup of tea. Quite a lot of nights that we'd do really long flights from Asia to the US and things like that. And we'd have lots of nights in the galley with our herbal teas, chatting. I think it's perspective. It's each flight attendant would give you a different answer to that, but I think what we all hold as a common superpower or skill, as however you may want to put it, at times it can be really testing because we do work in a very pressure cooker kind of environment, like all the things that you just expressed. You're running around, you're jet lagged, I'm trying to, I don't have more than two hands and I'm trying to wrestle different bags and running around a different city that I'm maybe not accustomed to get all these things, and then also make sure that I've gotten everything else sorted and the client's things sorted, and you're adhering to a lot of different pressures. But I think it's just about trying to always remain professional. We have to be a master of personalities with our clients. So that also has to, we all have some kind of, in general, I think that flight attendants have a very good sense of being able to anticipate others' needs. So I think it's also about something to do with that. I mean, in any environment, it doesn't even matter if you work in any industry, you're always going to have to manage different personalities. it's just about having patience. I think the older I've gotten worse at doing it, but it's always a challenge, and it's just a part of life, I suppose.
Yeah, and what about saying no? We talked about sometimes on previous operations when you get demanding crews who want to say, "What, we're going to have breakfast." I found this, particularly with sort of ex-military crews. Right, we're all having breakfast at 8 o'clock, and we're going to meet in the bar at 6 o'clock in the evening. And I really don't like having that restriction, because I think, we spend an awful lot of time with each other.
Right.
And when I'm in the right mood for it, I think I'm a particularly sociable person. But when I'm not, we're going to the P's and the Q's,
right.
trying to satisfy somebody else's expectation or loneliness, whatever, and being able to say no without feeling that the other side of the team, you've got the ladybird on you now as well.
I've got the ladybird now, yeah.
We're infested by ladybirds in this house. But feeling that the other side of the team are gossiping, saying, "Well, where's Brie or where's Ben?" They're not very friendly. They're not. I know you told me a story a while ago of a guy who said, "Well, you're not," a contract guy who came in and said, "Well, you're no fun because you had a lot to do. You've got your other sideline business, which we'll talk about now." And trying to manage that expectation. I mean, that's the same in life generally, isn't it, really? That sometimes we want to be with people, sometimes we don't. But being able to say no in the right circumstance and soothe people is just incredibly difficult, isn't it, really?
Yeah, it is really difficult. And I think, again, probably the older I've gotten and the more I value my own time and, for whatever different reasons, I want to read or even just the littlest simple things. I think it also depends on the operation. When we were at Nissan, I think that I used to really go away and enjoy that, because we weren't like, maybe we'd do, a 4-day trip here or a 7-day trip there. And then, my home time was distributed differently. So sometimes I'd take that as, okay, I'm away on the road and I'm away now for 4 days. So it's just 2 days of flying and 2 nights of crew time, and that was, I had my head in the game for that. And I really found that was really fine. But now, for instance, like when I go away, I'm on an 18-day rotation, generally speaking. So for 18 days, I don't want to be with the crew for 18 days. We have our own personal things to do in that time. And 18 days is a long time to be away from home. We have had I don't have a family, but a lot of people have their own families and their own things at home and their own admin to keep up with. And so that can be quite a difficult thing to have to manage. I think it's just about managing personalities, and I've figured out ways of being able to say, I'm not available right now, and just trying to be as polite as possible. And it's a constant thing that you've kind of got to always deal with, and it'll never go away. It'll always be there with some people. Figuring out what you say no and what you say no to and what you go to. But yeah, that is a challenge for me on the road. I do find that as well. It's, I have a lot of things, a lot of interests, and that keeps me busy, and I'm very happy with my own company. And I also like to go out and take myself out for my own walks and just explore, and that's no disrespect to the people that I'm with, but there's always things for me to do. So yeah, it's a hard thing. And I think that there's not just flight attendants, but I'm sure that there's flight attendants that always want to be with pilots probably as well, or always want to be around company. I think it goes all around in a crew environment. It can be a difficult thing to manage that dynamic, but
yeah,
it's ongoing, isn't it? There's not
well,
a lot.
It is ongoing, and some personalities are easier to deal with. I mean, you and I became friends very quickly because we both know that we enjoy our own individual companies. We're very happy in our own personal space. We do a lot of self-development work, and we're interested in just wandering around, very happy, very confident just to wander around and do our own thing. But when the time comes for a good conversation, and does that mean to say that we're any easier to get on? But well, I've certainly found my conflicts with other people because they don't understand why I don't fit into their regime, and they don't fit into my regime or my way of thinking things. And that is definitely the biggest challenge, I think, in our business. On the other hand, I've done airline flying, so have you. And you can be going away with a crew for 3 days and you get on one or two people. The groups fragment a little bit. Very rarely do you have a crew that stays together. And sometimes I've found that the pilots just won't go anywhere near each other down route.
Right.
But you've got other crew members that can get involved, and then they're not missed. And the dynamic of when there's only three of us, if somebody's missing, it becomes quite potent, and gossip can take over, particularly as we spend a lot of time in hotels trying to fill the time. And I found the ones that can't fill the time, they're itching, desperate. There's plenty of pilots I've flown with who are desperate to go flying. Or, why can't we go flying? I love flying, but I also love not flying. So if we go flying, that's great. If not, that's great.
Well,
but
it's only evil, because we don't want to fly, and the longer we don't fly, then we don't want to go and do it, and we get called. We think, oh God, I don't want to do this, but then it's the opposite. You've got too much, time, and you itching to get back to flying. We're never happy.
Yeah,
we're never happy.
It's human beings, isn't it? We all got too much or too little, too little, too much. But I think that again, I think the seed of all this is developing self-interest, that you can spend time on your own doing some studying. I think we have a very unique situation where we have a huge amount of spare time, which no other profession paid the same amount as us has that privilege. And I find it frustrating when I think people are hanging around, they come down and they watch the whole box series day in, day out. And you think there's so much that you can develop, and now you're frustrated, you're staying in a 5-star hotel and now bitching about the food's not right, the waiter's not doing this, not that right. And I had a crew, we've had this before, I had a crew in one of my jobs that literally disintegrated because they spent too much time finding things that were wrong instead of actually doing something constructive with their time. But you do really constructive stuff with your time.
I think that from a human, I'm very fascinated and we both share this, and I think that's why also we've gravitated to one another. We have a million things to talk about, but it's the human condition that I'm fascinated about, human interaction and human condition. But it's a human condition, that in itself, we're so spoiled, we're so fortunate, but we have so much time to complain. And I think that, we're very famous for that. Like, breakfasts, there's a lot of complaining going on. There's a lot of things to just be negative about. But I'm trying, I suppose, in my life, I'm at a stage where it's my choice what I react to. And you and I have had this conversation quite a lot. I don't want to sit there and listen to that negative chat as much, as much as I can possibly. There's a place for it. We all have to have that, and we all have things that we need to vent about. So there's that place for that too. But I don't want to be around it as much. It's not a very nice energy to be around. There's definitely a lot of that happens. And I have a million things. I don't know. I always in my life just have things that can keep me busy. I'm reading or exercising, going out for a walk, researching the restaurant in that city that I can go and try, or maybe I'm researching the next place that I can go and purchase things for the plane from, or going to look at a new supermarket, or there's plenty of work-related things that we can keep ourselves busy with as flight attendants too on the road, because we need to make sure that we're aware of what our clients possibly like, what particular things we can source in different places. Also, I've never really flown for anybody that, I have a lot of friends that seem to fly for people that maybe only fly a few times a month. I've never had that kind of schedule. It's busy. It's pretty general that I'm on the go most of the time. So although I've had still my fair share of downtime, that's when I'm generally catching up on my own personal life more so than really just having a lot of downtime or a lot of maintenance time where the aircraft goes into maintenance and I'm just sitting at home. I've never really had that kind of situation. So, yeah.
You're always on the go. And actually that's another question, isn't it? Is that you can go from, I've had both, so really busy, or sometimes 2 weeks I'm on the ground in Aspen, for example, which is great.
Oh, lovely.
I know.
So nice.
I know, but it's interesting, sometimes you go down to breakfast and people are bored. I think, how can you be bored? I climb a mountain for days on end. But on the other hand, when we're exhausted, we go to different time zones. You're constantly flying. I know you're looking after everybody. You're flying on different aeroplanes. You're flying with different cultural backgrounds as well. How do you deal with that exhaustion? Because fatigue is a big thing in our business now. There's a lot of studies going into it. It's a big thing that we train on, recognizing when we've got to that stage of the sleep has accumulated, the lack of sleep and the tiredness has accumulated to a point when mentally we're going downhill. Physically, our decision making becomes a problem. Safety then becomes a problem, and just in a world that's full of mental health issues, that can escalate. And you see that. I heard of a 650 pilot who took his own life recently, and that's tragic. And we know the German wings guy. We're not allowed to express our problems emotionally because we get our licenses taken away. But how do we deal with that? So it's all about health for me. Are we sleeping properly? Are we eating properly? Are we engaging with people? Are we withdrawing? When you feel exhausted, how do you deal with that?
Well, I think that this subject's fascinating in itself as well, because we need more attention in this area. So that's one side of things that I'll touch on in a second. But I think from a personal point of view, I think I even commented to you a few days ago. I've just recently done 2 night flights, and it really kills me these days. It's not like I was when I was flying when I was 26 years of age, when I first started flying. The night flights were a little bit easier to take. These days I really do struggle, and maybe I appreciate maybe I have not as many night flights, so when I do have them, they really kind of knock me around. But I think the older I've gotten, the more I've really had to hone into, when I am at home, I'm very conscious of trying to make sure, like I recently just got really sick, and that's not been a thing it's not usual for me. And so I was like, right, I really need to be very conscious of making sure I sleep the 8 hours a night, and making sure my health is really on track, and making sure I'm really, really conscious with what food, I'm putting in my mouth, and I am quite a conscious eater anyway, but just like doing the extra, because as you get older, it's natural. You've got to really, but not everybody, as you well know, in our industry, like anything, is conscious of those things. So there's people, and we even have flown with them together, that worried me because of their extra weight or whatever. We're flying in a very small, like we've discussed, environment, in a very tight environment. And from a safety perspective as well, that's also not a great thing. And so, I suppose there could be a lot more attention paid to that area, I think, in corporate aviation especially, and I think it needs to be more of a conversation. And that's why, we've had plenty of conversations leading up even to your podcast. I'm there cheerleading you on the sides. Come on, Ben, like encouraging you all the time to do this, because I think it's a fantastic venture. We need someone to be our advocate, to be in there, speaking about this on behalf of this industry, encouraging people, giving people more awareness to these areas, because even the company that I currently work for, we have, a briefing before a flight, and kind of goes around, is everybody okay? No one in that situation is really going to probably say, no, I'm not feeling okay today, So there's different ways that we can start being a little bit more aware of these things, but it's a conversation, and the conversations need to start coming. And I think that the more that people, just like anything, mental health is, and suicide with males, like it's been a thing that my brother as well, he has friends, and my dad has friends that they do a walk in Australia, that they're involved in a charity that talks about male suicide and male mental health. And because it is less likely that males, speak about their emotions and things, it is a really important dialogue to start. And we are in a quite male heavy environment, and it's something that, just like on the football field or the cricket pitch, it has that kind of male club vibe, and that needs to start being changed. So I think that what you're doing is a brilliant thing, because I think that this is all those sleep problems and everything. It's all stuff that starts to deteriorate our mental health, especially when we're in environments where, jet lag plays a part, and our health suffers because we're eating on the road and we're eating out all the time. We're not we don't have the same access to the same vitamins that other people, you know. I've suffered a lot from that, and I have thyroid issues, and I often feel really tired, but I have to be really, really on top of making sure that I'm constantly conscious and thinking about those things to make sure that I maintain my health. So yeah, it's an extra pressure of our job, I think, in our industry in particular.
Isn't it really? Thinking, I'm studying gut health at the moment, Dr. Stephen Gundry, who I'm recommending his book, The Plant Paradox, because I think we're, in the last 50 years, as he talks about, we're destroying ourselves with the food that we're putting inside us. And people say we have 5 vegetables a day, but we're putting the wrong vegetables inside us, the ones that give us lectin problems from tomato skins, cucumber skins and seeds and things like that. We don't understand that. And on top of that, we think we're eating a healthy diet by trying to do that. It's when stress takes over, we grab for the sugar,
right,
and we put that inside. That's going to cause more problems from the inside. Our gut gets hammered even more. We lose even more sleep. We are more and more stressed, and it just goes in the wrong direction. And for me, I'm realizing as I'm getting older and older is that you have to be so disciplined with that. And I do see on the flight deck, I see sometimes on a 10-hour flight, I see some of the guys having 4 or 5 different cans of Coke.
right.
You think they're going to go pop at any minute. You know, there's just such a lack of awareness in personal health, food-wise and emotional and even spiritual, you know, disconnection. Classic thing, spiritual health is going out and connecting with the environment, connecting with each other. Blokes isolate themselves. 2 things they do when they're stressed or things aren't going well. They isolate themselves, put a rope around their neck, or they punch. You know,
Right.
go down the
Lots of
go down
anger
the path.
management
Yeah,
issues,
lots of anger management issues, and I do think that it's something that you guys, the female perspective, which we have both inside of us males as well, we need to develop that big time. And I do think that the message, you have a big responsibility from the female side of things to help change us men on that front. And it's a huge responsibility, particularly in the corporate world when it's just you and mainly men. Have you flown with female pilots out of interest?
I actually have never. No, unfortunately not. In commercial, yes. But I don't recall ever in corporate, and I've been flying corporate now for, like 10 years. Yeah, it's quite sad, really. I would like to fly with. Yeah.
Well, I haven't for 20 years. I've got a couple of friends who are ladies. In fact, we were first officers, so I've never actually flown with I have one female flight, captain. But I'm very keen for the girls to come in the flight deck and not try and match the traditional male ego.
Right.
I think we need to blend this understanding. The men need to understand their feminine sides without compromising their masculine sides, knowing how to. Emotional intelligence is all about that, isn't it? It's about reading the situation. Sometimes we need to be assertive and enthusiastic, which is a classic male trait. And sometimes we need to be compassionate and nurturing and kind and empathetic and things like that, which is more of a female trait. We have every capability of having both those sides in us.
Yeah.
But I see that often you girls having to sue these very male egos in the cockpit, and I want to find ways to help deal with that. And I do find that I come across some big resistance on that front because I'm compromising millions of years of cultural background. But we have to change that. We have to change it.
No, I agree with you, and I think that you questioning that is one thing, and one thing that's quite brave and courageous. But then also, I mean, I've definitely come across a multitude of stories of some, situations where, like I'm kind of blown away by the conversations or the comments and sometimes I don't know if I'm necessarily proud of my actions in those situations from memory, to not have spoken up or not have advocated for the situation. Unfortunately, sometimes because you are the I don't know if I'm not speaking on behalf of, I don't have enough of these conversations with other flight attendants. But, we should question sometimes some more of the behavior that we sometimes see, that I have seen. I should have questioned some of that behavior. However, sometimes it is a little bit difficult when you are the odd one out, let me put it like that,
Yes.
because, there are two males, and then I sometimes do, you're going for dinner together and you spending time together, and there is a lot more of that testosterone than the progesterone energy. And sometimes I've chosen to remain silent rather than speaking my mind on the situation, not from a safety perspective, but more so from a dynamic perspective or whatever the situation is at the time, because there's not space for it. And sometimes, the odd times I have spoken up, it hasn't felt welcomed.
Right. Well, you effectively find yourself isolated in that situation.
Yeah, and sometimes, the further on I've got, sometimes I've gotten to the stage where I've isolated because I am happy with my own company. So that's a plus, I suppose, in this industry. Like I am okay to go and do my own thing. But I sometimes probably feel that I've isolated myself from the situation because I just want to be with them in a professional environment rather than also having to socialize with them. Yeah, it's a really difficult thing to deal with. But I think too, you bring up the isolation situation. I know you wanted to kind of talk about that because I think it is a big thing in our environment too, right? Like it can be a very isolating job. Like not just are we under so many environmental pressures, but just also that it's a really difficult thing for mental health.
It is, yeah. To be stuck in a hotel. I was in Kazakhstan for 6.5 years, and in the winter it was, I think my coldest day was. It was, and my coldest day on the ramp. I was kind of supervising moving the aeroplane out the hangar. It was -46, so you're less inclined to be going outside the hotel. So you're stuck in a hotel for a long time. And again, as I said, the crew on that situation ended up disintegrating for various different reasons, and I ended up taking over the operation and wanted to make some positive changes, and it didn't go down well with the crew. And actually, they mutinied on me, and they came to me saying that I didn't have any leadership skills. I didn't listen, which was, it was a very difficult time for me. And I really tried to understand the psychology behind that. And I probably didn't listen as well because I didn't understand the depth of the feeling of isolation. They'd got to a stage where nothing was right. The country wasn't right. The hotel wasn't right. The owner wasn't right. The management company wasn't right. And they kind of morphed into this group together. And I took over and wanted to change things and develop good relationships with the Kazakh representatives. And then I ended up losing their trust because they thought that I was going to push things too far. We were going to lose our jobs and things like that. And it was a really interesting thing. But I've actually given up drinking now. It's been 6 months, which is unusual in our industry. Yes. And I actually felt in the last operation that really set the cat amongst the pigeons, because it was very much, we're a team together, we go down, we have a drink. And me saying I'm not going to have a drink actually caused a bit of a problem. I was very happy to go out for a bite to eat. But I felt
that in itself isolated you without even it being a necessity,
Yeah, absolutely. But I just, in a way, I had faith that it was my value system, and it made, in terms of my general health and my focus and concentration and feeling of well-being, it was my time to give up drinking.
Right.
I was always a good drinker, I think. But actually, I did notice down the line that other people had the confidence to say no themselves, and I think that's one of the things, isn't it? Not to withdraw and just think I'll be on my. I'm only ever going to be on my own. Is to know that actually stand strong, even though you feel isolated. Just know that other people are learning from you, and you will come through. And I've learned that now that I'm talking to a lot of people, giving them the courage to actually stand up and just change the dynamic. To change the dynamic, you've got to be able to to weather the storm, don't you? Really?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Trailblaze through it and all those things, So, well, I think to stand and be an individual in those things and do something a bit different, you have to be kind of brave to just be okay to do those things by yourself. And like we were just talking about this afternoon, you're going to always disappoint people.
Yeah.
Everyone has different expectations. And I think it's this industry, like what I think sometimes gets missed. And I think because everything is always so fast and we're moving so fast all the time and we're, going through different time zones all the time. And it always kind of feels like we're chasing our tail a little bit. And I think that because of that, sometimes people don't give the right kind of like reflection or thoughts to the environment. But it's just like life. Like we wouldn't go out and be friends with everybody that we meet in the street.
Yeah.
That's in front of us all the time. Or, we don't go to every yoga class or boxing class or whatever class that we go to. Even, hiring an accountant and we don't vibe with everybody. We're looking for the person that resonates with us, right? So I do find that in this industry, it's quite interesting that, people do want to hang out all the time. We might not necessarily choose to socialize with one another, but we're put into this situation where we have to. And therefore, the same thing, like if there's someone that wants to go and do something a bit different, I've flown with all kinds of different people.
Mm-hmm.
And not having a drink is like the least weird thing that I could think, I mean, I like to go to the crew lounge as much as anyone else and have a glass of wine. But, I think that's a really sad thing that has to be something that ostracizes people, especially too when for the times that we do socialize with one another, we all are feeling isolated, so why not just like get together and just all have a nice time together, whether we have a drink or not,
Yeah.
It's strange.
But it is strange, isn't it? And again, that comes down to the classic emotional health. If somebody isn't fitting in to the way that you want them to do it, doesn't mean to say that they are any less of value. And in fact, if you're finding that difficult, then we should be looking at ourselves.
Right.
And I certainly there's one guy just couldn't believe that I wouldn't have a drink and wouldn't go out on, I'd go home at 11 o'clock rather than 2 o'clock in the morning, even if we were flying the next day. Same age or in the 50s, and I just thought the neediness, the emotional unhealthiness of that is, it's worrying. It's very worrying. I actually felt quite sorry for him as well. I just thought, very lonely individual. And there's a difference between loneliness and being alone, isn't there? Mm-hmm. I don't feel 100%. Lonely in my life. I'm happy to go off, even though I'm on my own. I'm alone. I know that I can walk into somewhere and sit in a cafe and observe and think about human psychology and how people behave and read a book and think, oh yeah, that works out. I've seen it. You're doing a study all the time. That's one of the benefits of our job.
Well, you're also very curious, so you've got a lot of things to keep yourself busy with all the time because I don't know the last time I was bored because there's always something to find to do, to learn about, to, enhance your knowledge or... So I kind of feel very fortunate in this position that we do have, like you said before, quite a lot of downtime that you have to pay people for their time. We still are giving our time a lot of the time. We're away in a different country and that has to, and like we've just discussed throughout this whole conversation, there's a lot of environmental pressures that get put on us for that reason. And so we should be what do we work out? Remunerated or remunerated?
Remuneration.
I need to look that up. So that needs to be an indication as part of our position. But I like that we have some extra time to be able to do those extra things if we so choose to.
Absolutely.
But it's a choice.
Well, it is a choice, and it's health, isn't it? How do we recognise if we're going down an unhealthy route? And the problem, like any social or business situation when it comes to humans, is that people the way I see it, who are unsure about themselves will either withdraw and try and hide away, or they'll try to get to the next stage of, say, the step up on the management ladder, but they're not confident to get to that level, and they want to institute change by controlling everything. They can't cope with the fact that people might think differently or question the way they're doing it, and they try and control even more and more and more. Then the tension builds, the trust breaks down, and then somebody explodes one way or another. And I think that seems to be quite common in our industry. I haven't seen a lot of good leadership teams in corporate aviation, and I know that people will probably rear up when I say that, but I think that the source of that is self-awareness. The core of emotional intelligence is self-awareness, of understanding, actually, do we know what's going on inside? Are we feeling lack of confidence? Are we trying to hide away? Are we developing that, admitting we've made mistakes? Sorry, I got that wrong, but I'm learning.
Right.
Because then we can regulate emotions, and then we can start to motivate ourselves to learn a little bit more, bring other people into the sphere, build better relationships, help deal with conflict and things like that. And I have to say that you on many occasions have helped me in some difficult situations up the front there.
Blowing smoke up my...
yeah. But again, it's the empathetic side which comes
Right.
from the female side, and I would like to change that in our particular industry, and it just comes down to those leadership qualities. Leadership is just kind of thrown around everywhere now, isn't it? Great leadership, but it's a real corporate thing to say.
Well,
but it's actually about understanding yourself so that you can then move on and support and help others.
And I think that, like what you were saying about your Kazakhstan operation, what I was going to say then too, and you've just said again, there's not many flight departments that you've flown with that have a great leadership framework, and I think I'd have to agree with that in some way or another. Like, there's always some areas that could definitely be improved. And sometimes it's I think it's resources. There's a lot of slap bang kind of stuff that we need to just get done. It's very reactionary sometimes rather than the other way around. I think, it's an expensive, it's already a very expensive industry. And so maybe they don't put enough resourcing into the right framework sometimes for the management part of things. However, yeah, I would agree with that. And I think in comparison, like for instance, when we worked at Nissan, it was a corporate company that had a framework, not to say anything about the management department there. We had a great team, but I think we worked for a corporation that had a framework that, they had all of the right things in place. So therefore our flight department was probably given a little bit more of the right frameworks. And I think that there's a lot of people, and I'm sure that you would agree with me, and probably many people that we know would agree with, but there's a lot of people that make their way up in aviation because they're in the right place at the right time.
Yes.
But not necessarily because they're qualified, or does anyone put the training or training into them to qualify them to be in that role. And that's unfortunate, because I think that we could all be developed in a much better way if we had better frameworks than that. I think CRM, for instance, also could be reinvented.
Yes.
Much better, to a much better level, if we had those better frameworks, if we had people in place that actually were more thinking about things from an operational point of view of how do we actually grow our staff, just like any other corporation like that. Yeah, we're in aviation, but what does that mean that we can't also still be developed as
be
individuals creative. and we could bring so much. Okay, we have our flight duties, but we could still bring better elements to the department, because maybe this person's trained in that, or that take different people and bring more things into that particular operation, for instance. I maybe not articulating it very well, but I think it could be enhanced.
Uniqueness, recognizing uniqueness, and rather than trying to stamp. We work in a world of standard operating procedures. But that's great, because that puts the skeleton together, but then we need to put the flesh on the bones, don't we? We need to understand the uniqueness of individuals. We can't expect every pilot to fly the same way, every flight attendant to operate the same way. We need to understand that some might be better at preparing this kind of food. Some might be better at helping somebody who's got a problem in their, and a health problem or something like that. Nurturing, can deal with conflict. Other people are better at doing the public speaking type thing. And I think that's, again, the taking interest in somebody. Emotional health is taking interest in other people.
And building on that, but then also, this is like another breakfast talk and crew lounge talk that happens all the time. Like, how could we do things better? And everyone always has their best solutions, but nothing really ever ends up getting put in place. It's just kind of like shooting the breeze. But I do think that, there could be a lot done, not just from enhancing the operational side of things, but also from working with the people that you've got. Like, what training could we give them that really would enhance these people so that they go on? And I don't know, I'm a big advocate to mentoring, and I would like to eventually get to a space where maybe I help people. I know that you're very interested in the same thing. And I think, how great would it be to be the one that what your reputation precedes you to hear that, that Ben LaFleming, he just helped me out so much. He was so great. That's just, it's about passing it on. It's making sure that the people coming up after you are helped out. For instance, this flight department that you currently now work for, okay, now obviously this would be something that you should be paid for, but maybe it's a team focus, for instance. Maybe your co-pilot has a skill that he could teach you, and it's about getting everyone in and doing a workshop, for instance. Or now, not everybody's going to be interested in that. You and I are more curious to go, I'd like to learn about what you could teach me. But I think also, flight departments could do much better at being a little bit more professional, like a corporation, and having that kind of framework. And there's not one that I've worked for really that has that. Let's really grow our people in. Develop the CRM, the crew resource management, which I always think, people say CRM, they don't actually know what it means. It's about how to develop human potential. But you've got to be interested in recognizing it in the first place. And I've just joined a super new company. I'm very excited about it, and there's a very dynamic leadership team, as far as I can tell, and very interested in my interest in human factors. And I really hope to be able to be able to push that forward finally in this particular organisation, because at the end of the day, we need it for human flourishing. I mean, really, we don't live in a world now where all we have to think about is surviving, like we've done for most of the millions of years. We actually have the opportunity to create incredible abundance. Absolutely.
We really do. So we need to move it to the next level. Blokes, as I said, just to repeat, need to develop their empathetic side. Ladies need to develop their assertive sides a little bit more. But unless we have somebody in leadership who's unless we have somebody in leadership who's prepared to nurture that and pull it out, then we're going to be stuck. And then everybody's going to be looking over their shoulder. Unfortunately, aviation is very much money critical. So as soon as something goes wrong, we can all lose our jobs. I've lost my job 4 times effectively in the last 5 or 6 years, I think it is. But people are living in fear. When you're living in fear, you don't have that same creative opportunity to take risks.
Absolutely.
And try and stand out. But we need to be more open. We need to be more open about our emotions, and I think that's a way forward, certainly.
Yeah, for sure. I agree with you, and it needs to be encouraged. That's, I think, one of the roadblocks. Definitely needs to be constantly encouraged, and you need to feel that, it's going to be you're going to be listened to, that there's a platform for that, and that's a hard thing too, I think.
Yeah, very much so.
Yeah, especially too, between the dynamic of the cockpit and the cabin. I mean, that's what we're constantly trying to work on with CRM, right? But it needs to be a constant conversation too. Flying with you, for instance, I would have known that I would have been able to come up at any time, and that there was an open door policy, but that I could have come and told you anything and I wouldn't have felt stupid. But it's that maybe stupid's not the right word, but like there is sometimes a little bit of, I feel sometimes a condescending kind of attitude can come across in that situation because I don't know as much technical stuff as you, but I'm your eyes and ears in the back. So it's constantly encouraged of me, but then sometimes I'll say things and I don't necessarily know how to explain it, and kind of I've gotten looks before where I'm like, this silly girl, and it's never nice to feel that way, but I live by the way of, no question stupid, and I want to be able to have things explained to me and vice versa. Not everyone's going to know everything about everything. So yeah, I think that it's important that that's something that's constantly spoken about, and that there's a change in that too.
I think absolutely right. Genuinely being interested in somebody, listening to them, understanding that they may be struggling on different levels is really important, isn't it?
Well, it's at the end of the day, like our primary concern, safety, right? So that comes down to safety. I think, like that's from a mental health perspective, I think we need to be asking those questions, in a flight briefing, make sure that the question is asked, or like we're checking in with our colleagues every now and then and making sure we're aware of the possibilities of things that we can pick up on that people might not be right, and not jumping to conclusions too quickly, but being aware, because sometimes as well someone might just be going through something and that could be the end of their career. You've got to be really very careful about, but being aware, and then I think also I've lost my train of thought. Done that a few times today, but anyway, being aware.
Yeah, being aware and just not jumping to conclusions. And effectively, it's easy to jump to conclusions if you criticise, you point the finger and say, well, and, belittle, invalidate somebody. And that just goes, lack of emotional understanding and intelligence as well.
Yeah.
We talked about some good stuff, haven't we? Isolation, not being prepared to listen to each other, how to deal with different dynamics and health.
It's a Pandora's box, really.
It's a Pandora's
there's
box,
a lot of things that really need to be spoken about. People need to start being a bit more aware of. It is a real issue, as you've discussed with a few more of your the people on your podcast. Like I loved Ed's.
Yeah.
Ed was a former colleague of ours, and he has a lot to say, and I have a lot of respect for what he's got to say, and he touched on a whole different kind of dynamic. And then Emma's was fantastic as well, and she has a lot that she said that is really very current for the climate that we've recently been going through. And her what was her the thing during COVID that she ran?
Project Wingman.
Like fabulous, how inspiring. But there is a lot of dialogue that we need that I don't think has been talked about, and I think that it's starting to come up in a lot of other areas in life now. A lot of other industries are already way ahead of corporate aviation in these kind of chats, and I think that you're starting a great dialogue. I think it just needs to keep going.
Well, I hope you guys have enjoyed our face-to-face sofa conversation. I hope you managed to understand what I was saying despite my impediment there, but it's been such a conversation, and we will continue this on, and like all my guests, I'd love you to come back at some time in the future, because then we can reflect on what we were talking about before.
Well, like I was saying to you this afternoon, I think you're about to blow up and get really famous, so he might renege on that and take it back.
I hope for the right reasons.
Just little old Brie might not get invited back to the sofa, but it's been a pleasure, and hopefully so.
Yeah, thank you, my love.
Thank you.
So yeah, again, I hope you guys have enjoyed it, and of course, any comments that you have on any of the subjects, isolation, emotional intelligence, you name it, please let us know, because this dialogue, as Brie said, we need to have this dialogue. It's really important for human flourishing in our industry and humanity generally. So please let us know in those comments below. But until the next video, please remember to keep it in the greens.